Today, we're going to cover how you can add any API as a tool to your AI agent in N8N. Now, if you've been building AI agents in N8N, you know that the power of your AI agent is basically determined by how many tools, what tools it has access to. Now, N8N has a huge range of tools built in, so you can see all of these tools. But as you probably know, there are endless APIs out there that you could be using, as tools. So what if you want to use a tool that, or what if you want to use an API that is not a built-in tool in N8N? You have a couple of options, right? So one is you can try look for a community node if you're self-hosting N8N, but in many cases, those nodes won't exist, or you might not be self-hosting N8N. So adding community nodes is not an option. So in those cases, if it is a tool that you will be using over and over again, an API you will be using over and over again, I would actually recommend this option, which is called N8N workflow tool. What that means is you can turn that API into a separate workflow that you can then call again and again. So just to give you a quick example of what that might look like is if I create a new workflow as an example, this. So I might have, let's say, scrape URL. So maybe I'm using a scraping service. So what I want to do here is actually just do this trigger. So executed by another workflow, and you can define the fields that you want to pass in here. So what fields do you want? So that depends on the API. So here I'm going to be using the Dumpling AI scrape endpoint, right? So these are the fields I need. So URL, format, whether to clean the content, and whether to render JavaScript. So all I need to do now is come here, and then I can either define it using a JSON example. So let's do that. And let's just give this an example. Otherwise, you can just put it in manually if you just define the fields one by one. Right. So URL, I'll just using this, give you an example. So URL is a string. Next one was format, which is also a string. And then we have cleaned and render.js. So clean, and this should be a Boolean, and then render.js, which should be a Boolean as well. Cool. That's all good. So what we now need to do is we have all the inputs that we need to put into this API call. So all we need to do now is do the HTTP request, and we just need to set it up as per usual. So URL will be this, the base URL is this, that in. You will need to set up your authentication. So we already have that set up there, which is good. And then the body, right? So here is where you would pass in each of your inputs. So URL will be the URL input, right? And then actually, to be honest, you could probably just pass in the entire using JSON. And if we just passed in the entire JSON, we can feed this in. Sometimes it's easier just to do it the old-fashioned way. Just basically mapping these by one, cleaned, and then finally we have render.js. Is that in the wrong one? Render.js. And that's basically it. And then all we need to do now is just return this. Where is it? All good. So I can save this now, and I can go to create a new workflow. Let's pretend I'm doing an AI agent. So it'll be on chat message, make this chat public, back here, and then add in an AI agent. Let's keep it simple, and then choose a model. Let's just use OpenAI, standard choice. And then for the tool call, we can add in call N8N. And here we might call it scrape URL. And then from the list, we can just have scrape URL. And you can see we've got all the inputs here. So we can let the model define this format. We always just want it to be markdown. Let's say we always want these to be on as an example, right? And that's all good. So here, what we can do is just configure this a little bit. So what we want to do is set a system prompt. So you will crawl the URL provided by the user using your tool, right? Cool. So let's open the chat and let's give this a go. So let's say n8n.com and see if it's working. So output, seems that I'm able due to call N8. Let's describe it. That might be why. So call this tool to scrape any, let's try that again. So preset, try that again. So you can see it's called the tool, but looks like there was an error. The authorization, yes, sorry. The authorization was using an old API key that I've deleted. So let me quickly get a new API key. 1 second. I'm gonna generate a new API key. So I'm actually just gonna save this. I'm gonna jump back into our scrape URL one and just quickly update those credentials. Header. There we go. So expression here, you can see that the authorization should be bearer. And we're going to put in a new token. I'm just going to hide this really quick and we'll be right back once I add the token. Now, dragging this back. So we've added the token. So let's press save and that should be good. We can quickly test this actually. The inputs are all invalid, so it's not going to work. See if we can add in some test data. Let's say N8N example. Do some save and canvas and let's work. Amazing. So it's worked now, which is really good. So if we have a look, see that we've got all the content that we want, basically full content. Cool. For now, we can go back to our agent and try that again, and it should work now. So where is the chat gone? Chat N8N.io. And if we just have a look, you can see it's calling the tool and then going back to the AI model for the response. You can see here what is happening. Tool, the results are back, and then it's gone and done another completion. So you can see here's an overview, blah, blah, blah. And you can sort of do whatever you want with this, right? So you might want a blog post rewriting tool. So all we need to do in that case is just change up prompt a little. So you'll then write a SEO blog post based on the scraped content. So we just slightly tweak the prompt. And then now when we just find any blog post, Telegram bots as an example, just paste this blog post in. So reset and just bring this here. It's calling the tool again, and then given our renewed prompt, it should now just draft that blog post. And the latency on GPT-4 Mini seems to be a bit longer than usual today, but that's all good as long as it works. And here we go. We've got a blog post, a rewritten blog post based on what we scraped. And this is just an example, right? This video is not really about building a blog post rewriter. This is really about how you can add any API as a tool to your AI agent. And what we've covered so far is if it's an API that you know you're going to continue to use over and over, something like a scrape URL, which is very common, you probably want to create a workflow for it. And then you can just use the call workflow tool, right? In cases where you might be a one-off and you can't be bothered making the workflow, you can actually just use the HTTP request tool here directly. Generally speaking, I would recommend the workflow option because you never know if you're going to reuse. But if you know for sure you're not going to use it that much or just maybe once, then the HTTP request option is much faster and easier to update as you go, right? So it's really up to you. But in this way, you can basically use any API out there as a tool for your AI agent to make your AI agent more powerful. And once you've sort of unlocked this skill, you can sort of see it unlocks so many things, right? Because before you were limited to tools that were built into N8N, but now you can use any API. And there are thousands, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of APIs out there for you to play with. If you're building with tools, I have to sort of recommend the different endpoints we have at Dumpling AI. A lot of these, we built these modules with building AI automations and AI agents in mind. If you've built AI automations and agents in the past, you'll know that you run into these issues a lot. So generally, you need ways to access data from the internet, different social media platforms, different websites. You need to convert data into LLM ready formats. all that sort of stuff. We've got endpoints for all of that. So if you're looking for a strong toolkit for building AI automations or AI agents, definitely recommend checking out dumplingai.com. But yeah, that's basically all I wanted to cover in this video. If you have any thoughts, questions, or comments, feel free to leave them below and I'll try my best to get back to you.